and welcome back. It's a two-man show this week. We couldn't get a fill-in for Brett, so it'll be myself and Jared
Hey yo.
for our Week 7 review, Week 8 preview. We're going to go ahead. We're going to get this party started with, I think, the only upset of the week. Yours truly lost to Junior Giants fan. We pretty much both decided not to start a quarterback. CJ and Spencer Rattler canceled each other out with terrible games. And, AJ Brown, George Pickens, Baker Mayfield pretty much did me in. So, congrats to George for beating me. I fell to 4-3. Moving on, we've got Josh and Brett. No surprise here. Josh's team, kind of a mediocre week for Josh's average, but more than enough to beat Brett this week. Then we've got Ross coming off a huge game where he scored 200 off against Josh. He narrowly beats Adam here. Only scored 150, so kind of seeing the ups and downs that Ross's team has seen this year. He left Najee on his bench, which was a big miss. Moving on, after Ross moves to 4-3, we've got Jared and Kumpt. And Jared wins. And the funny note, and he's been talking about it all weekend, was he benched Patrick Mahomes in favor of Russell Wilson, and it worked out. I don't know how much of this was just a spiting Patrick Mahomes' mediocre weeks, because he hasn't been bad. He's just kind of been not what you expect. And yet he had his worst week of the season this year, so what a call from Jared to start Russ, who is apparently back. Russ is back to Seattle, Russ. Jared gets
it's
the
one
win.
game. It's one game. We'll see.
Against the Jets, though. That's a pretty good defense.
That's true.
Moving on, Jared gets the win to move to 4-3 on the year. We've got Hunter and Clint, and Hunter continues to use Lamar Jackson to beat his opponents over the head. Although, we're starting to see the chinks in Hunter's armor, because there's a couple weeks in a row here where he's been very low in points. And if he just gets the right matchup, he could lose. That might be a teaser for the preview. But he gets the win against Clint and moves to 7-0. Now we've got Devin and Disco. More of the same. Another game where we just expect Devin to win, and he does. Disco kind of unfortunate. He got nothing from Montgomery. Kirk Cousins had a bad game. Jordan Mason was mediocre. Yeah. Devin got, by the way, Joe Mixon. 3 games this year he's been in the 30s, and the only one he wasn't was the game he got hurt in. So, that trade looks really good for Devin as of right now. Anyway, with all that being said, I'm going to flip it over to Jared here to talk about our injuries from this past week, and there's quite a few of them. How about it?
Yeah, quite a few of them. Couple in the same game. I don't know. Like, obviously things happen, but I don't know if I can remember another week where 2 teams that had 2 great wide receivers lost them in the same game. And like to different extents, obviously. But obviously, Mike Evans, hamstring injury. Pretty early in the game too. I think in the end zone.
Yeah, it was like the first quarter, I think.
Yeah. I thought when I first saw it that he would be done for multiple weeks. Like, I thought IR was in his future.
I think the injury you're going to talk about next has something to do with when he's going to be back.
Yeah, you could be right for that. He's considered week to week at this point. I don't expect to see him this week. I would be surprised to see him next week. I think they're close to a bye, I'm thinking, though, too. So that could be in play for this as well. Obviously, same game. Chris Godwin goes down with a very bad ankle injury. Didn't even want to show it. So the NFL, I feel like in the past, has showed some pretty brutal injuries. So anytime they don't want to show that injury, it's always, concerning. He's already been declared out for the season. He's getting surgery.
They didn't show it because you can physically see his ankle disconnect from his shin bone.
It's brutal. I don't know if it means anything, but if you look around on the internet, there is a video of him saying he thought his career was done.
Yeah.
He mouths or he says that to the trainer, but if you could read lips, it's pretty obvious that's what he says. So I don't know. Like obviously,
He's
he
not
could
young
be
anymore either for
overreacting.
NFL standards.
He's 28
Yep.
or 29, one of the two. He's right. Yeah, almost 30.
Receivers are only great till the early 30s, so an injury like that this late in their career is
Yeah.
it's ominous, is what I'll say.
So obviously the Bucks go from an offense that I would like to have pieces of at times because they score a lot of points to maybe you still want to have pieces. It's just not going to be the two pieces that everyone drafted. So Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, both hurt and out. The next two was Debo and Ayuk, both got injured. I think the Debo thing is a little weird. I mean, even coming into it, wasn't he like maybe not going to play for illness?
Yeah, he had an illness coming into the week, and then he was like questionable leading up to the game. Then he ended up playing, and he only played like the first couple snaps. It seemed like they were like, "Oh, he's not good to go. Like he's not himself," and they just kind of sat him down.
And then obviously Brandon Ayuk got hurt this week and is headed to IR. I think something in his knee. Did he tear his ACL?
Yes, I believe that is. I will bet.
I just wrote down knee because that's what it's listed on Sleeper, but it's probably an ACL tear. I think I saw that.
Yes.
ACL.
Diagnosis torn ACL.
So he's done for the season unless they make playoffs, right?
And that could be a long-term dynasty effect too for going into next year. An ACL tear this late in the season is always like, when are you going to come back?
Mm-hmm. So that's
for example, T.J. Hawkinson tore his ACL in Week 7 last year, and he might be coming back this week.
Yeah. That puts it into perspective. Like you're talking out for a
year.
Piece of time. So obviously, two offenses that people I feel like have lots of pieces of in fantasy.
Devin.
Just losing their two main guys on both sides. But anyways, next one, Jaden Daniels obviously hurt his rib. He left that game early. Marcus Mariota came in. They ended up still winning, I believe, right? I think that was they won.
Yeah. They killed them.
Yeah. So they won that game still. Obviously, Jaden's been really good all year. So hopefully you see him back on the field soon. He's probably going to miss this week if I had to guess.
Really?
Even though his mom said he was fine.
Let's put fine into context. I think that was just saying he doesn't have a long-term injury.
True. That could have been the thought there. DK Metcalf also got hurt. He's got a sprain, so I mean that could go anywhere from like out for a week to 3. I can never tell with those type of things. So I think it was declared a grade 1 sprain. So I don't know. Do with what you will there. Obviously, and then kind of just news. I don't know how much he's fantasy relevant or has been this season at least, but Deshaun Watson ruptured his Achilles. Done for the year, maybe into next year probably at this point.
For those,
although didn't I feel like Kirk Cousins?
So I don't.
Like his was
his an ACL? Because
Achilles.
Was it? Okay, I didn't realize Kirk was an Achilles because Rodgers was his Achilles last year, but I believe. Okay, so for those that don't know the medical lingo, because myself and Jared had to look this up beforehand as well. A rupture is a complete tear of the Achilles, whereas like a tear can be a partial. I believe Kirk Cousins had a torn Achilles, and Watson and Rodgers both had like complete tears, like ruptures. And I would think that lines up because I don't remember Kirk's injury, but I remember seeing like Aaron Rodgers's. You can see his calf pop, which is like the signature sign of a torn or ruptured Achilles. And the same thing with Watson's from this past week, where you see the muscle pop and they go down, and you're like, well, his season's over.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, obviously, fantasy-wise, that probably makes the most impact with who's their QB going forward.
So upgrade for David Njoku, upgrade for Cedric Tillman, upgrade for Jerry Jeudy, upgrade for Elijah. Pretty much the whole Browns offense just got better.
And maybe even Nick Chubb, because they're gonna have to try to figure things out, and having a good running back's always good situation. That I'll be interested to see. I mean, not fantasy related. I don't know if I see a world where he's on their team next year.
Watson?
Um, Watson.
I don't
Yeah,
know what the injury does to the contract, but I pray that we just cut him.
yeah. I think. I mean, it's hard. Yeah, it's a hard decision, but you have 3 seasons of him being a Brown, and every season has ended the same way. It's
Yeah,
actually
injury.
crazy if you look at the stat line that he's recorded in those 3 years. They've
Yeah,
been
it's bad.
identical. No, he's played 6 or 7 games, all 3 years. Had not great stats. I mean,
And
it would be nice
the,
to see a whole season of him, but I don't think you're ever going to get that. You're
so
just going to have to cut your
like
losses.
the craziest part to me is that the last like this year and last year in the games he's gotten hurt, it's been his best game of the season. Like last year against the Ravens in the second half, he was like 16 of 18 for 100 and something yards and a touchdown, and led them on 2 touchdown drives in the fourth quarter to take the lead against the Ravens. And then this year, he was having a great first half against the Bengals, 15 of 17 for 128, and goes down. So like, when you finally start to see glimpses of him putting it together, he's been hurt the last 2 years. It's just brutal.
Yeah, not great. But yeah, I think that's the most of the relevant fantasy information.
We may have missed some injuries,
but we might miss some. But that's just the ones that.
So we're gonna go from injuries to a different way of missing games. Jamison Williams. He was suspended 2 games for PEDs, and he kind of accepted the suspension, but now they're potentially appealing it. So we'll have to see what that means. And the appeal process, he still might get suspended, but if he's appealing, I believe that he'll still be able to play this week if the appeal is still going on.
I believe that is correct, yeah.
And then whenever the appeal is over, like when they finally make a decision, like, okay, we'll give you 1 game, or if it's still 2, then the suspension would resume after the appeal process is over. But,
yeah.
Yikes.
For sure. It's a yikes, dude.
Then we got some fun NFL news from this morning. This is actually, in my opinion, very fantasy impactful for multiple players. DeAndre Hopkins has been traded from the Titans to the Chiefs. This was wild news to me. Hopkins hasn't had a great year, but the Chiefs have been looking for receiver help since Rashi went down. In my opinion, this is kind of like a red flag for Juju Smith-Schuster's injury. He's already been declared out for this week, and we're talking here on Wednesday. That's already a concern, and then they go get Hopkins. I would guess they're expecting Juju to miss next week at least as well. But yeah, Hopkins is now on the Chiefs. Jared, do you have any instant reaction to this move, fantasy-wise?
Maybe it'll improve my quarterback situation with having Patrick Mahomes. I mean, that would be the hope. I never felt like, I don't know, not that there's anything wrong with Hopkins, but I feel like it's been a very long time since we've seen him be elite across the field.
There's been glimpses of it.
Yeah, and he still, I feel like, has a crazy ability to catch a ball.
Yeah.
And bring it down.
Elite hands.
Yeah, I don't know that I've felt in a while, at least, that he has the same, like, he'll wreck the entire game for a defense that he used to have.
Well, he's 32, so.
Well, that's definitely part of it. Like, you can't do that forever. But.
Yeah.
It'll be an interesting development for sure.
I think this is an interesting, like, it's an arrow up for Hopkins, a brief boost in value. I think it's like I said, concerning for Juju's injury. I don't think this really affects Xavier Worthy or Travis Kelce at all, but someone I do think it affects is Calvin Ridley, because he's the only guy there in Tennessee now, so, he's going to get a lot more targets, whether they're worth anything to be determined, but...
Yeah, that's like, I don't know, one of those situations, it's funny how quickly a team will go from pushing to win now and getting their quarterback pieces to folding.
Yeah.
And, like, I felt like the Titans were very much like, we're going to go...
There's a belief in Will Levis.
Yeah. Yeah, and now it's yeah. I
Didn't
feel
work.
like they're moving on. That's what they said in that trade. And I mean, he's old enough that maybe you're just you could argue you're revamping for younger players.
Yeah,
Um, but at the same time, like you definitely don't think they have hope this year because you're definitely I don't know how good DeAndre Hopkins is, but you're definitely better with him than without him. I would say. I mean,
for sure.
I don't think he's a burden to a team. So, yeah, it's definitely interesting though.
Yeah, for sure. It's always fun with these wide receiver trades. I mean, we had the Amari Cooper and I forget who was the other one. Amari Cooper and Devontae Adams trades last week. So another week of fun trades. And those worked out. Those were good trades for the first week. Devontae was a little bit disappointing. Amari Cooper had a great game in Buffalo.
Yeah. I would say it'll be interesting to see what that looks like in week 2 and 3 of those trades because the Adams trade didn't necessarily seem like a waste, but I mean, you lost another game and now you're 2 and 5. So I don't know that you're making a push for a championship.
There's people making memes that he's going to be traded again before the deadline.
Yeah. I saw a joke that he should get traded to the Giants so the Steelers can play him again.
Yeah, that would be fun. I would enjoy that. And they do need receivers. It makes sense. He's already in New York. The dots are connecting here.
Yeah. They could play. And someone said that it would be the first time that a player has well, it was a Steelers fan, obviously, saying it would be funny if they got traded and then they lost because it'd be the first time a player had lost to the Steelers 3 times in a month. But
anyway, we're gonna talk some more about last week's games. For my bust of the week last week, I have Xavier Legette. This is someone I personally had faith in other leagues where I had played him. Just absolutely did nothing, honestly. He had 1 carry for 6 yards and 2 catches for 3 yards, combining for 3 total fantasy points in that game. Just awful. The matchup looked good. They were playing the Commanders, who apparently have a shutdown defense now. Either that or Andy Dalton just turned back into a pumpkin because we are nearing the end of the pumpkin season.
Could be.
It could be that. But speaking of quarterbacks turning into a pumpkin, Jared, what do you have for us?
Yeah, my bust of the week is much to Dale, your dismay, CJ Stroud, which I guess we looked into it and it's not his worst game ever as a pro, right? It's second worst.
For fantasy, it's his second worst, but they are super similar games.
Yeah. So just not much. 10 for 21 and 86 yards, 5 carries for 19 yards, no touchdowns, but no turnovers too, right? Like just
he was just kind of a game manager to an extreme level in this game. The rushing game was working, and Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell weren't creating separation.
Yeah. I actually don't know the answer, and I showed to this. Did they win this game?
They did not. The Packers won on a last-second field goal.
Yes, I remember that game actually. Yeah. Yep.
A brutal watch as someone pulling for the Texans in that game. But alas, we go from quarterback turning into a pumpkin to... Jared, that's your cue.
Oh, sorry. I thought I was waiting. I was like, did he freeze? Yeah, so I picked... or I didn't pick, I should say. I kind of talked about it. I didn't pick him, though, as my bold prediction last week. But my surprise of the week was Mr. Unlimited himself, Russell Wilson.
The Steelers' offense looked unlimited.
Yeah, it did. Unlimited points, honestly. I think someone said that was the most points we scored since 2018.
Okay, yeah, we get it. You're talking
crazy.
About Russ.
But anyways, yeah, Russ went for 16 of 29 for 264 yards, 2 touchdowns in the air, 3 carries for 3 yards, and a touchdown on the ground. Ended up with 28.86 fantasy points, at least in our scoring. We do have the long reception bonus that Pickens gave him there. So probably a little higher than most leagues, but still a good week for sure. But yeah, I mean, if that's every week for the Steelers, we'll be sitting pretty. And I have Russell Wilson on my roster, so maybe he could take Patrick Mahomes' spot.
If that's every week for the Steelers, we might have a new Super Bowl favorite.
Yeah.
with that defense. But you know, speaking speaking of guys that I would have never expected to return to that level of performance, there's another guy here that had a great game that I didn't see coming. Rachaad White, welcome back. He was great last year when he got all the work. This year, he hasn't done much outside of week 1. The Bucks were up 10-0 against the Ravens, and he wasn't really involved. And then they got down by a lot. And all of a sudden, Rachaad White was playing a lot of snaps. Got 6 catches, 70 yards, and 2 touchdowns in the air. Combined with his 40 carries on 40 yards on 10 carries. Combined for 30.1 fantasy points. An explosion that is, I believe, the second best game of his career. But yeah, wild to see this from Rachaad White. And for, a guy I didn't expect to see it this week against the good Ravens defense. But congrats to Rachaad White. Now, go ahead.
I was going to say that just kind of turned into a points fest, honestly. I had the over bet on that game, too, so.
It did. Jared did cash a nice parlay for over-unders.
Yep, that was one of them.
It was indeed. So now we're going to go talk about our matchups for this upcoming week. And I think I know why Brett couldn't make it tonight. He didn't want to have to talk about this beatdown he's about to receive in week 8.
Scared.
He is scared. He's running. That being said, myself and Jared both predicted me to win this. I don't think there's much to talk about here. My team has underperformed, though, this year, so we'll see. If Chris Olave is playing, I'm probably starting him over Terry McLaurin. And maybe Spencer Rattler will just pepper him with the football. But that will be determined. Next, we've got Ross versus Devin. Devin, another one of those contending teams. Ross has kind of been a surprise. We've seen the boom bust games. He has Derrick Henry in tow, who had another great game this week. And Amari Cooper has had a fantasy renaissance of sorts with this trade. Ross could pull the upset here. I don't think he will. I believe Devin wins this game. I'll pass this over to you, Jared.
Yeah, this game, obviously, I think that Devin is probably the favorite. He probably is by projection, too. I picked Ross to win this game, I think mostly just because I think he's a better team than I thought he's been. So doubting him now just seems like a mistake. He's got some members from high-powered offenses that I just think could really put up big games. Obviously, Derrick Henry. Although they are playing the Browns have not looked great this year on defense in total, I would say. So, Derrick Henry. He's got Jared Goff, who sometimes will put up monster games. He's got Najee, who, in the last 2 games, has scored 23 and 21 points. So if he continues on that trend, obviously that's great. And then the other one that I think is kind of a sleeper, but not really. He's gotten a lot of touchdowns. Is Brian Robinson. I feel like he's pretty much guaranteed to get you at least 12
against
points.
Chicago, though?
That is true. I imagine this. I actually have the over on that game. It's and now that
I hate that.
Jayden isn't playing, I don't know how I feel about.
I hate that over right now. Yeah.
But we'll hope that that cash out. It's actually the late window game, so theoretically, if the first over hits, maybe I'll just be pooling my money because I don't know if that's gonna work out for me. But anyways, yeah. So just with those couple pieces, I have some confidence. I think Ross will get this one out.
Interesting. Jared predicts the upset over his best man.
Yeah, really.
Next, we've got Jared and Adam. Adam has Chubb back. We didn't really talk about that last week, but but he kind of doesn't have Anthony Richardson because the Anthony Richardson we saw in week 1 looks to be long gone. And we may never see him again. He looks terrible in every facet of the game except for running the ball. It's very sad to see because there was a lot of hope in the fantasy community after week 1 for this guy. Just doesn't look like it's going to happen. The inaccuracy is insane for him. Patrick Mahomes stays on the bench. I'm kind of surprised you're not starting him over Rodgers right now, Jared, but I also get
that might be a question for sure.
a standpoint.
I haven't. Yeah.
I don't think
I
it
don't
matters
know
who
if
you
it's my
start,
final
because I think you
choice.
win either way.
Yeah, for sure.
Then
But yeah.
we've got the matchup. We didn't get him undefeated. Josh fell a couple weeks ago, but we finally have the juggernauts going head to head. And honestly, this is interesting for a couple reasons, because if Josh loses, this opens the door to that number 2 seed wide open. We're halfway through the regular season now in fantasy, and if Josh beats Hunter, then it's gonna be harder to get into the top 2 seeds. But if Josh loses, he'll be even with Devin and 1 loss away from anyone else in the top 6. Obviously, a long way to go yet. We're only halfway through, but personally, I do think Josh loses, and that door to that number 2 seed opens a little bit wider, because I have Hunter staying perfect on the year.
Yeah. The whole way through, you think? Or enough confidence for this week, at least?
There's enough confidence for this week. I think we're starting to see some cracks in Hunter's team, as I mentioned in the review section. There is a potential loss toward the end of the year. In week 12, he plays you. In week 13, he plays Ross. And in week 14, he plays Turb. So, week 12 against you is probably the only other game I think he could lose. But
yeah,
it's something to keep our eyes on, for sure.
Honestly, recently I've just felt like it's been my running backs. If my running backs hit, I'm a dangerous team. If they don't, I'm not. Which is kind of fantasy football at times, really.
If my players score points, I feel like my team's good.
What's that?
If my players score points, my team's great.
Yes. It definitely makes your team a little better if they score points. But yeah, we'll see what happens. So yeah, in this game though, I actually have Hunter falling to Josh. I think it's a little bit just because you're always cheering against the people who are undefeated.
Yeah.
I know even last year, talking about it, people are just like, "Oh, is Jared going to lose this game?" Because I stayed perfect last year, and then won it all, which is surprising. That would have been so sad if I just what was that
That would have been amazing though, because we played twice. I lost to you in the regular season, and if I would have come back and beat you in the championship, that would have been icing on the cake. But
yeah, obviously didn't happen. But anyways, I think that Josh will win this one. They both have good teams. There's just, like you said, a couple pieces that have been underperforming for Hunter recently. Obviously, Lamar Jackson has been playing pretty lights out. At least last week was a massive game for him. So that's always good for him. But Tyreek Hill has not been the same player without his quarterback. Although, is that happening this week?
It does look like Tua has returned to practice. We didn't mention that because we're only talking about people that are getting hurt, but coming back from injury. TJ Hawkinson looks like he may play this week. We kind of mentioned that with the Brandon Ayuk thing, but Tua did return to a limited practice today, which, in my opinion, probably means he's going to play this week, but obviously it's hard to say because concussion symptoms could return at any moment, and then he's missing probably 2 more weeks if he has any symptoms pop back up. But
for sure,
that would make a big difference for Hunter's team. And Jared, let's just, off a whim right here, I'm going to pose a question. Do you believe that Hunter and Josh will maintain the top 2 seeds as we head to playoffs? Or do you think that one of the 4 below them will take over a spot?
I got to look at actually what the standings are right now because I don't even know if I know.
So you, myself, and Ross all have 3 losses. Devin has 2. Those are the 4 teams that are I would even consider for the top seed.
Yeah. He just lost Ayuk, though, and I know it's not a huge blow because he hasn't done well this season, but he's now no longer starting Ayuk, obviously.
Right, and I think the big thing with Devin is now he's forced to start Tank Dell, who has also not had a great season.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if I was Devin, I would be looking for a wide receiver.
Yeah. But with
I
what
don't
picks?
know how much you believe in him, but George Pickens is probably available.
Ooh, I don't
Um,
know. Stephon Diggs is available, and Devin's kind of
for sure.
jumping on that Texans offense.
Yeah, I don't know that you want Tank and I don't know. I would say at this point, I don't think we have any other evidence that someone else will take the top two spots. So I'm going to go
So
with no. I don't think anyone will take it.
I slightly disagree there. I see why you're saying that. I think like the top two teams. We're starting to see a little bit of a, um, like they're slowing down a little bit. They're not both way up there like they were in the first month of the season.
Yeah.
And I mean, injuries are gonna happen. Like DK Metcalf's hurt and may not play this week. Kenneth Walker's been in and out of the line. Like looking at Josh's team, I think this is a huge week for Josh. I think if he loses this week, I would lean towards yes that either you or me will take that number 2 seed away down the stretch. But I think if he wins, I think they're the top 2 seeds.
Yeah.
Because they have such a gap in points scored that I don't think a team drawing even in the win-loss column is actually going to surpass.
Yeah.
Because of where they're at right now. But it shall be interesting to see down the stretch. So we have split on our matchup of the year so far, I'd say.
Yep.
And now we've got Disco and Clint. Looking at these lineups, you know, Jared, I'll let you talk about these a little bit, this matchup here.
Yeah, let me pull it up so I want to actually be able to see it. Disco and Clint. Yeah, I had Clinton picking this one. I think there's a couple things. Like, I think Bo Nix, although he hasn't always been the greatest, he's playing Carolina this week, so that always bodes well for him. Yeah. Anytime you're playing Carolina. And he's got the Bo Nix and Sutton stack here, so I think that will play well for him. Mark Andrews seems to have reemerged as a tight end in the fantasy football world. Obviously, last week was greatly helped by two touchdowns.
3 in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, 3 in the last 2 weeks, though. And if
he's always been a red zone threat.
Target, yeah, that's all he has to be. If he could score against a touchdown a week and have 2 to 3 other catches, he'll be number 1 tight end on the year.
I mean, that's what we're doing. Like 4 catches, 3 catches, 4 catches, and 9.5, 15.5, 20.
Yeah. So we'll definitely see on that. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, I thought he had a bigger game than that. Never mind. I was about to mention someone who isn't that great. Bigsby, of course. I like Bigsby a lot. He had a great week last week, had 28 again. But we'll see what happens. I think just considering Clint's team and some of the players across the aisle that I don't have as much faith in. He's got a lot of 49ers players, or at least he's starting Jennings and Mason. And he has Hawkinson in his lineup, like you said, who might be returning this week too. So it'll be interesting to see. He's currently doesn't have a quarterback in his lineup. He does have Bryce Young on the bench, though. So if he slots him in there, we might see some points, or he might be better off putting a wide receiver in there. You never know.
Nobody. He might be better off putting nobody in there. you have Clint in this game, and actually, I had originally picked Disco to win this, but after looking at this again, I think the projections for Disco's team are a little bit generous for some of these guys, so I am actually going to agree with you. I believe Clint will take this matchup and move to 3-5 on the outside looking into playoffs, but in that range where he could slide in there. The last matchup of the week, we've got George and Kumpt. Sorry, did I say George? I meant JGF and Kumpt. The battle of the abbreviations, we finally get it. Maybe this is the matchup of the year. We said it was Hunter and Josh, but the abbreviations battle. Obviously, Kumpt just lost Chris Godwin for the year, and with him losing that, I think it's pretty safe to say that JGF wins this matchup.
Yep, I would agree with that.
Yep.
I think it's pretty. I mean, Kumpt has. I think his lowest score on the year. And I don't see that changing with a loss to one of his key players. So.
Yep. brutal time for that stretch run of the season, but better luck next year. Now, we got our bold predictions. Last week, Brett went with Tyler Huntley to go for 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a turnover. He got one of those right. He did have he got none of those right. He did not have a turnover in that game. But what he did have, he had 7 completions on 13 passes for 87 yards and 1 single touchdown. He also got hurt in the game. He got hurt, I believe it was late in the first half. I could be mistaken. But yeah, so Brett, big whiff on the Tyler Huntley bold prediction. So we're going to go from one bad quarterback prediction to, I'd say, a pretty good one. Myself, I predicted Drake May to go 350 yards, 3 touchdowns. That's 350 total yards, so pass and rush. He went 26 of 37, 276 and 2 touchdowns in the passing game. And he added 18 yards on the ground, so in total, 294 and 2. I wouldn't call it a hit, but I'd say it's a pretty solid. He had a solid stat line, and I predicted something great. And speaking of solid but predicting great.
Yeah. So for my prediction last week, I was mostly trying to insult Dale because he's a Justin Fields fan. I said Pickens was going to catch 7 of 9 for 139 yards and a touchdown because Russell Wilson was the quarterback. He didn't have that.
Wait, can you say the line, though? Can you say the line?
What line?
The line that you said last week.
Oh, D line?
Yes.
Oh, because Russell can throw was the exact quote. Yeah. And then, so this week he ended up having 5 catches on 9 targets for 111 yards and a touchdown. So obviously not like the exact thing I predicted, but within reason. Like I said, I wouldn't say that was like an exact prediction. Neither was to Drake May, but they were both not like
very
something
close.
You would. Yeah, very close. Not necessarily something you would think was definitely going to happen. And was like the Drake May especially, like he played really well. Although they did lose again, didn't they?
They did.
That is brutal.
But he also was missing Demario Douglas for a lot of that game due to an illness.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it feels like they keep doing that. Like, Drake May, they lost.
He's got the offense humming. Well. I'll say that.
Yeah.
The offense looks good in New England, and they don't really have pass catchers. So it's exciting to watch Drake May. We'll see what happens this week against the tough Jets defense. But moving on this week. So without Brett, I decided I was going to have some fun. I'm going with a double-up bold prediction. So on one hand, I'm predicting Jaden Reed, wide receiver for the Packers. I'm calling it for 6 catches, 160 yards, and a touchdown. He's playing these same Jacksonville Jaguars. Fun prop bet information here. Jordan Love's passing touchdowns line is at 2.5, which is pretty crazy to see. You don't see that very much. But yeah, my prediction, Jaden Reed, 6 for 160 and a touchdown. It's mostly because he's playing the Jaguars, and I like Jaden Reed as a player, but yeah. That offense also looks really good right now. The second part of that bold prediction, I believe, is a little more out there. I'm predicting Troy Franklin, who we've seen get involved in Week 5, 17% of snaps. Then Week 6, he jumped to 65. Against the Saints, it was about 50-50. But they were also way up in that game. They didn't need to keep throwing the ball. With that being said, he's got another great matchup playing the Carolina Panthers. My only concern is if Bryce can keep the Panthers in this game for them to need to throw the ball. But I predict Troy Franklin to have 8 catches for 120 yards and to get his second career touchdown in the NFL. And we're going to, while we're here, we're going to stay in this game. Speaking of trying to keep up with the Broncos, Jared, what's your bold prediction here?
Yeah, so my bold prediction is a little bit of a throwback. If you watched our Week 2 episode, or maybe it would have been Week 3. No, Week 2, because that was the last week he played. My bold prediction was that Bryce Young would actually have more yards and touchdowns than Justin Herbert, who he was playing that week. That didn't work out. He also got benched and lost his job. So I think I'm a little bit of a bad omen. I hope I don't double up here and get him benched a second time. I'd be
he's only starting because Andy Dalton sprained his thumb in a car accident.
Oh, is that what happened?
That is what happened. Yes.
Okay, crazy. Anyways, so my bold prediction, and especially against this defense that has played really well all year, is indeed a bold prediction.
Insane, man.
My Bryce Young bold prediction is that he's going to have 240 total yards, run and pass, a touchdown in the air, and a touchdown on the ground. He will throw an INT that'll probably be a pick six to lose the game. Just going to throw that out there, see if it hits. Yeah. But yeah, we'll see. But that's my bold prediction. He has had more yards than that before. So
not very many times.
I think he's done it twice.
No, three times.
Okay, I was gonna say he had a good week late in the season last year that a lot of people pointed to and said, "Oh, this is what we thought he was going to be." But yeah, we'll see what happens for sure. But that's my bold prediction for this week.
See, yes, he has had 3 games over 200 and what was it, 240 total yards?
Yeah.
Wild stuff. Anyway, I just want to point out, Jared, how does it make you feel if I told you that Aaron Rodgers against this Denver defense went for 251 total yards?
Oh, really?
With no touchdowns at all.
Yeah.
And the Jets lost that game.
A-Rod lost to the Steelers, too, so...
I'm sure Bryce Young would, too.
Well, yeah.
Anyway, all that out of the way. We're going to quickly review the standings on the season since we're now halfway through the year. Jared, do you have any big surprises, one way or the other, good or bad, looking at the standings?
Just league standings?
Yep.
You're throwing a wrench in this. I didn't...
I am.
For this. I would say the top 2 places I would say are kind of surprises. I thought they were in the top 5 teams.
Yep.
But I wouldn't have thought they would have been number 1 and number 2. Especially Hunter. I feel like I was probably lower on his team than Josh is going into the season. Be interesting to go back and see what I projected. I thought for sure it would be myself, you, or Devin in the top 2 spots. Some mixture of that. So that's definitely surprising. I'm a little surprised to see Kump's team be as bad as it is. Just because I thought there was some hope on his roster of like point scorers, and that's not really panned out for him. I would say other than that, everything's pretty close to what I would have projected at this point. Obviously, I think it's just the top the top 5 I thought would be almost flipped on their head, with you at the top, followed by me, followed by Devin.
Yeah. So.
Followed by Josh, followed by Hunter.
Yeah, it is pretty close to exactly that. I just threw up our preseason rankings here. I agree. The top 5 we nailed. It's just not in the right order. Through 5 weeks, the bottom half of the league we kind of swung and missed on. Excuse me. Kumpt is nearing the bottom at number 11. We had him at 12 in the preseason. We had Adam at 11. He's sitting at 8th currently. We had JGF at 9th. He's sitting at 7th. We had Ross at 8th, and he's sitting at 6th. And actually looks like a strong contender. He looks like the 6th best team in the league. And that's probably where it'll split. I do think the top 6 will be the 6 in the playoffs, unless we have some more injuries that shake things up. But, I mean, JGF, he was 9th. He's currently sitting 7th. Turb, we had a 10th, and he's sitting in 12th, and I don't think he wants to be any higher than that.
Yeah, I think he's really fine where he's at right now.
Yeah, I think he's fully jumped ship, but it's fun to look at that. Figured halfway through the year, it's time to look at some stuff. We got some more next week, and we will be back with some more water punishments between myself and Jared next week, so stay tuned.
Sure will.
We'll see you then.
Goodbye.